Welcome back to Strip to the Soul, and I'm just going to start off saying I can't believe that we're at the end of 2025. It is almost the new year, and it's not to hype up the new year like it's some magical thing. However, I think it is a really beautiful time where we can stop and pause and reflect on everything that's happened in 2025, because when you do look back in your life, you do look back at certain years and like what happened and what unfolded in those years. And yeah, this year was such a transformative year for me. Not only for me, I feel like so many friends, and we can still be in that transformation. We don't have to get to the end of the year and expect everything to have, been completed or the goals to have been accomplished. It's not that, but I do feel it's been the year of shedding for so many people, and that shedding might still be happening, and that's just the beauty of life. I feel like it's non-stop. However, I did want to reflect in this episode on 2025 and talk about setting intentions for 2026, maybe in a different way to you might have already done. And yeah, as this year comes to a close, I just want to slow down, and I'm not rushing into these new goals and resolutions, but I want to actually pause and look at my own life and also offer you that invitation to also look in and reflect on your own life. Because like I said, 2025 may not have gone the way you planned. I feel like it never does. Whenever we are setting goals at the start of the year, we have this vision for the year, and I'm just waiting for the person that everything pans out that exact way. Like, if you think about it realistically, the year never unfolds as it should, because you cannot predict these things. Some things landed, some things didn't, some versions of you arrived and some fell away, and you cannot predict it. You do not know who's going to walk in your life, you do not know who's going to walk out, but I do think life is always guiding you in the right direction. So in this episode, I just want to talk about how to reflect on the year that you've just lived without necessarily judging it. And also how to look at goals. I spoke about this on my TikTok and stuff, how to look at the goals that didn't happen through a different lens, and how you can really set intentions for 2026 that are really rooted in your truth without it being just a tick box goal as such. I just want you to leave this episode feeling a little bit more aligned and inspired. And when you get to the end of the year, right, like where I'm at now, it's really kind of overwhelming when you can think of all the things that did and didn't happen, all the different versions of you navigated, the quiet kind of struggles that you've gone through. Maybe it's seeing a family member get sick, or losing someone, or a part of you just that doesn't resonate anymore, whatever it is, right? It's hard when you look back, because you're like, oh my god, so much has happened, or so little has happened. Maybe if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and you've got to the end of the year and you feel like you haven't accomplished much. But rather than rushing into the next year, it's really important that we stop and kind of reflect, because it's easy for 1 month to bleed into the next, and before we know it, you're already thinking about what's coming versus what's past. And I do think it's beautiful to look ahead. I do think it's amazing to have a vision and have these manifestations, but reflection matters, because if you don't integrate all the lessons of a year, you end up repeating them. It's kind of like, if you don't learn the lesson, it's going to come back. And so before you start thinking about 2026, I did want to start this off and really want you to ask yourself, who have I become this year? Not what have I achieved, not what did I post, or, what do I have to show for it, but who did I become when things didn't go to plan, or things turned out differently? Because sometimes things don't go to plan and turn out differently are still amazing, because it's really easy to look back at my year and be like, oh wow, I moved country and I got a new house, and I traveled to all these different places, all of that, great. But who did I become in that? What version of myself am I now? And that is a really deep question to ask, because I keep on jumping on Instagram and everyone's making these vision boards for next year, and I'm like, that is wonderful. I'm doing that. I've done that actually. But also, you can't just do that, because you're not actually integrating the past. And if you don't integrate and you don't look within, you're never going to actually uncover the blockages that are stopping you from actually getting some of those dreams or, goals that you're setting for the next year. And when you're looking at, this kind of who did I become in this past year? It's subtle things like maybe you're more resilient. Maybe you learned to sit with disappointment. Maybe you stopped forcing things that weren't aligned. And if I ask myself this question, because we're all about transparency here, I'm learning to be a softer version of myself, that's for sure. But I'm also like, my confidence feels more true. I don't feel like I have to try and explain myself or try to be a version of myself. It's just like I feel like my confidence speaks for itself without me having to perform. And I've also really let go of any kind of need to impress people, and that has been a work in progress, where I felt like I would be upset if something didn't go well or do well. Like, I put a lot of my self-worth and validation on success throughout my life, competitive bodybuilding, competitive dancer, like all those things. And I've really found that I've just been enjoying to do things for the process and the journey of it, and not necessarily just for the outcome. And so I feel like I'm a lot more grounded, if that's the word. And, I feel like I say that, and the God, universe, whomever is going to test me in that statement. But, that grounded has also, caused me to root, it's to set roots, to commit to a relationship, to move, to deepen my relationship with myself. And growth doesn't always have to be like hashtag productive. It sometimes looks, like I said, like rest, like endings, like learning what you no longer want, like slowing down and rooting and grounding. And, none of those things are wasted. It doesn't have to be hitting these goals or traveling to these places, because I can tell you, I've had New York on my vision board for the last 5 years. I've still not been. But I've also achieved so much more than just visiting a place. And when you look at the energetics and the emotions of what you actually have done, it will be a lot more important than that, iPhone on your vision board, or that, whatever it is, dream destination. And when you realize that the goals that don't happen aren't the most important thing, you realize, what the true meaning of everything is. And I think sometimes we can shame ourselves around like unfinished goals, around plans that didn't work, or around timelines that shifted. And I made a video sharing how a lot of goals I had from a couple of years ago are only coming true now. And so to always hold the goal and vision if it is still true and aligned for you, because what you have to remember is you have evolved since January. So you might have made a goal in January, but that might not be relevant to you now. You might be like onto bigger and better things, or something that you once placed value in no longer holds meaning. And so, you can look back at your vision board and hold this shame around it. But if you can accept that the timeline shifted, or that just wasn't meant for you, you can not look at that vision board now at the end of the year and kind of have this sense of disappointment. Because when a goal didn't happen to you, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that something else is happening instead. Because for something that didn't happen, something else did. And it might be like, okay, you had a dream to go to Greece in the summer, but actually you worked your ass off in an office. And, it's easy to compare one to the other. But if you reframe your outlook on it, you can see, okay, well, I made money. I got better at my job. I was dedicated and productive. And it's your outlook and your mindset, and really the energy of what you give will change your whole relationship with the goal. Because you could be disappointed that you didn't go somewhere, but then if you don't look at the positives, you'll never see what you've gained from actually that goal not happening. And sometimes the goal was right, but the timing wasn't. And sometimes the goal was based on what you thought you should be, but not actually with who you are. And I do believe that life needs to teach you something before you can, get hold of something that you might actually want. I always say I'm so happy I never got into the relationships that I thought I wanted, because I'm so happy in the relationship that I'm in. And what you can ask yourself is, a deep question that I've been reflecting on is, what did this goal represent for me? Like, what is the representation of that? For example, if I look at something like just kind of silly, maybe I had a picture of like nice hair on my vision board, that actually represents health. Or if I had, a dream destination, what does it represent? Freedom, right? If it's money, what's actually the deep root of that? Probably safety or stability. And often when we get attached to the outcome rather than the energy behind it, this is where we can kind of fall short and disappoint ourselves. And then when that outcome doesn't arrive, we miss the fact that we already might be close to the feeling that we think. So, you might have a dream destination, like I said, and the feeling is freedom, but then you might have this amazing relationship with yourself and food that once felt restrictive and now is so free. And if you can attach the energy to the goal, you actually might be achieving that goal just in a different form. And a delayed goal is not a dead one either. I do believe it's just being reshaped. And like I said, I've had the goal of going to New York for ages on my vision board, but okay, I might not have gone there, but I've gone to so many other places, and that is the same meaning, right? It's travel, it's freedom, it's like visiting somewhere new. And when you understand the energy behind your goal, this is when the intention setting becomes so powerful rather than just performative and having all this like lux things on your vision board. And instead of asking, what do I want next year? You can start to ask that question with yourself, like, how do I want to feel? Do you want to feel like ease and like stress free instead of like pressure? Or do you want to feel like consistent with something rather than like chaotic? And when you set goals from the energy, and you understand that energy, you recognize the energy and you're clear on it, your actions will naturally start to align you to that, because you're going to stop forcing outcomes that don't fit. And you'll kind of have to learn to stop chasing the things that actually drain you, because you say you had that goal of peace rather than pressure. Like, why are you putting pressure on yourself to achieve something when your goal was actually peace? Does that make sense? And I'll give you an example, all right? So if instead you're saying, I want a new job, right? The deeper intention to that might be, I want to feel respected and secure, right? So when that's how you're going to start looking at your goals in a deeper kind of way. Like, if I want a relationship, that desire might actually be emotional safety and connection. And you can be doing all of these things and tuning into that energy until the relationship arrives. You have to be in that frequency, energy attracts. So if you wanted that relationship and you understood that the real desire is emotional safety, you create that within yourself. And also say it's connection, start hanging out with your friends, join a club, go to a group class, start inviting that energy into your life and start saying no to anything that's not that energy. I'll give you one more example, right? So it's like, I want more money. The deeper root of this might be, I want more freedom and choice. And so you have to look at your life and ask yourself where you feel caged, where you feel stuck, where you feel like you don't have a choice. And when you can start changing the narrative on other areas of your life and changing how you're living, I feel like how you do one thing will you kind of multiply into how you do everything. And you have to get honest about the energy that you're actually craving under the goals. And then you create the space for it to arrive. And that's when you never expect it, right? I really wanted a relationship. I really wanted connection. I wanted like this sense of just like freedom and love, and that's exactly what I started giving to myself at the start of the year. I traveled, I invested in myself, I went away with my friends, I just started pouring into myself. And then next thing, I met a guy. So you have to actually just trust that those things are going to work out for you, but you have to start tuning into the energy of what's underneath them first. You also have to release old versions of yourself and old visions with compassion, because you have to be able to let go of goals that are old and didn't come true if they are no longer aligned. Sometimes it can feel sad, especially if you've held on to them for a while, especially if you've had this goal for ages. Say, I'll give you an example. I had a goal of being an IFBB pro for the longest time. I outgrew that goal. That goal wasn't for me anymore. It doesn't mean I had to achieve it. I just was no longer that version of myself. And no, I never made it happen. And although it was a goal, it can feel bittersweet. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if you offered it me now, I wouldn't take it. So you have to mourn the version of your life you thought that maybe you wanted or that would have existed by now. The relationship, the career, whatever, the version of you that had it all figured out, whatever it is. But you release that outdated version of you, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to achieve amazing things. It's not that you're giving up. It means you're growing. And like I said, dreams expire and that is okay. And maybe they were a dream when you were younger and maybe living in the survival mode, or, still were comparing yourself to others, or, thought that's what you needed in order to be successful or enough. And, you're allowed to want something different now. And you are allowed to rewrite your future without apologizing or without kind of explaining yourself, because I think that is actually maturing. And I think that's a beautiful thing when you can look back and be like, oh, that was so cute that I wanted those things. My dreams are so much better now. Like, I feel like life just, although it's hard and it's challenging, it's never perfect. In the grand scheme of things, it does keep getting better and better. And that's not to say you don't go through heartbreak and pain. Like, I've gone through some hard years, and I know there's hard years ahead of me, right? It's not to sugarcoat things, but in the overall kind of picture, life does keep on getting better. And when you set intentions that feel grounded and alive, you're kind of more excited about them, because it's like I said, it's not just a box to tick. So for 2026, instead of setting these like rigid resolutions, I don't do resolutions, right? I can have some dreams and visions and goals, but that's happening at the start of the year, end of the year, middle of the year. But what I'm inviting you to do is set intentions that do feel supportive. So rather than a resolution, an intention. And an intention will sound like, I intend to move through life with more honesty, or I intend to choose relationships that feel calm and mutual. I intend to trust myself even when the outcome is uncertain, right? Intentions give you room to breathe and be flexible, be feminine, be in flow, and they guide your decisions without boxing you in. Because when, if I had looked at like my, dream life, for example, if I had it word for word, everything that I thought I wanted, and then I looked at my life now, it's like they're so different, but at the same time, the real energy behind them is the same. I feel safe in my home. I have a beautiful place to live. It doesn't really matter where it is. Like, all of the surface level things are never as important as the deeper rooted emotion and intention behind it. And you don't need to have a perfect plan for the year, but you do need a direction, I think, that keeps you moving, and one that feels true for you. Because when you have a vision or a direction to move to, you can stay aligned to that. You stay aligned to that goal, and the steps will reveal themselves naturally. I feel like life has this way of giving me the next step at the last minute, right? It always has, but it keeps me on my edge, and it keeps me pushing, and it keeps me excited. So if you can stay aligned to the energy of what that you want the year to be, anything that is not that, you can just make sure you walk in the other direction. And you have to trust the bigger picture. If this year has taught you anything, please let it be this: that you are not behind, you are growing, right? Life is not a straight line. It is truly a series of lessons and blessings and pauses and redirections and unexpected openings and beginnings as well. And all the things that didn't happen to you this year, they truly didn't miss you. I believe it's still on its way, or it was never meant to arrive in the form that you imagined, and that's okay. So as you step into 2026, you get to do so with more trust when you actually lean into this. And you can also have more compassion for your own process, because I think truly that's actually the real win in life. And I really hope this podcast episode has brought you some peace and closure on the year. I also hope it's given you a new way to look at, the new year to come, like reframe your mindset with it. And just be gentle on yourself, especially the end of the year can feel hard, family, like everything. Life isn't easy, right? So you have to be kind to yourself in a world that isn't always the kindest, right? So please share this with someone if you feel like they would like it. And if you haven't already liked the show and given it a rating, I would love that for the end of the year. So thank you so much for listening. I also wanted to shout out, if you made it this far, my book is now available to pre-order on Amazon. And yeah, I just wanted to share that, because you got to give yourself a little bit of self-love as well. And yeah, I will speak to you guys next week in the next episode in the new year. Mwah!